Rachel Morrison, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, you walked into my house and I said, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you," and then you reminded me that
I was an operator on your show a million years ago.
How funny!
Was it After Lately? After Lately.
Oh, After Lately.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes.
After Lately. That was fun.
It was fun.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
It was totally ridiculous, and it was so long ago. I literally called Brian Burgoyne, my dear friend, and was like, "Was I the DP? Was I an operator?" He was like, "Well, I was the DP," and he was like, "And Abby and so were the operators." So I must have maybe day played more than,
or maybe you were the director and you just don't even remember.
Very possible. I think I would remember.
Well, you've obviously accomplished a lot since then, so I want to talk about it because I just watched your newest movie. Well, this is your first directorial debut movie.
It is my first feature, yes.
So you were originally a cinematographer.
I'd like to think I'm still a cinematographer.
Okay.
I just happen to be I'm moonlighting as a director at the moment.
Well, you were the first woman to get nominated for an Academy Award as a cinematographer.
That did happen.
And that was for Mudbound.
Yes.
And then you were also the cinematographer on Fruitvale Station.
True.
All films that have a very specific look to them. This movie, A Fire Inside, is based on a real-life boxer. Her name is Clarissa Shields. And she's from Flint, Michigan. And what I really loved, for starters, about the movie was that the end of the movie wasn't where the end of the movie should be.
Where you're used to
where you're used to seeing, you're used to seeing the triumph at the end, and you focus. And while there is triumph at the end, the big kind of crescendo of the movie isn't what you would think would be the end of the movie.
Inspirational sports movies have a real construct. We're so used to, you sort of start from nowhere, you work really hard, you have a setback, you work even harder, and then you win and the credits roll. Mm-hmm. And this is not that, because life is not that. And I think that, to me, was what was so exciting and interesting about this film is Clarissa is this badass, she's resilient, she's all the things, but not just inside the ring, outside the ring too. And the story doesn't end with the win. It really asks, which I think is also much more like real life, what happens after the win, especially if you are not Michael Phelps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what does happen after the wins? So she wins. She gets a gold medal at the Olympics at how old is she? 17 years old.
17,
right?
Wild.
So she wins she trains. It's that exactly a kind of coming up story. She busts her ass. She's from a family that doesn't have a lot of money. Her mom is kind of not really present. She's raising her siblings, and she meets this coach, and obviously they have that bond, and then they get to the Olympics and they win the gold medal. And then what happens after she wins the gold medal is it's pretty devastating to watch, but probably way more common than any of us know. So what was your experience researching that?
Yeah, well, I was fortunate to have a lot of archival material and have Clarissa. This is a woman who's very much alive and well and has opinions in all the best ways. And for me, it was incredibly important to try to, do justice to the authenticity of her experience and the story and of Flint as a community. So I leaned, heavily into what really happened. But yeah, there was this idea that, if that winning would be enough, that if she could just get the gold, then endorsements would follow, and that, money would come and all of these things. And, that wasn't what panned out for her. I think that the reality of being Black, female, and from a community that's, not seen as often as other people, as other communities, she really, she had to sort of work twice as hard. And as kind of come back, pick herself back up and eventually, get noticed again. But I do think even in real life, as I think for most of us, you don't get to stay on top, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not how the real world works. So even had those things come, you still have to find it, get up the next day and make breakfast and figure out what's next.
And we're also talking about boxing as a female sport, which was at the time I think it's a hard thing to sell as a woman who's, as she says in the movie, stop telling everyone you want to beat the shit out of other people. That's your motivation and that's your impetus. They're like, you're not going to be on a cereal box cover by saying that and declaring that. They wanted her to be more feminine when, even in the sport that she's.
Yeah. And I think that's true. It's women so often find that it's not enough to just be great at what you do as an athlete, to be great at your sport, as for me as a cinematographer, to be you get viewed through this whole other lens of, what it's like to be a female cinematographer or a female athlete, and how you present yourself and how you look and all of these other things. So it's like you have to jump through a bunch more hoops. And then in her case, yeah, it was a sport that people don't expect women in. They don't necessarily want to see women punching each other. And so she's one of the absolute best, and, is still by all accounts not known the way that she should be. Hopefully the film will start to change that.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. How do you feel about your role as a female director, as a female cinematographer? In relation to what we're talking about in your professional career and kind of like the arc of your career, how do you feel that you've been impacted by certain setbacks or sexism or any of the things we all kind of face being a female in a male-dominated industry?
I mean, I've always tried not to let the noise overwhelm me or the lack thereof, right? It's more like you never know why your phone doesn't ring than I can't speak to the most acute experiences of, being treated a certain way. I can speak to people not expecting you to be in the powerful position that you're in. So sitting in a van on the way to it was the pickup set of Black Panther. And, the Teamster gets in, and it was me and the AD, who's also female. And he's like, we were running late. And we're like, we got to go. And he's like, I'm waiting for the DP and the first AD. I'm like, well, who do you think we are? What? And that's kind of more, my experience has been people looking past me for the cinematographer, expecting me to be the AC. But beyond that, I really tried not to ever let that, if you let that get you down, you can't just focus on making good work.
Yeah.
And I think I've always just tried to keep my head in the work itself. And I think to that extent, I think we're all ready to just let it be about the work, right? We don't want to be the female cinematographer or the female boxer. She's the best athlete. She really is. She's that good. And so to be able to start talking about Clarissa as a boxer, not a female boxer, or me as a director, not a female director, that's
a female comedian
or a female comedian. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the next step is just, we want to get to the place where I think we're starting hopefully to when you say doctor, you don't picture a man.
Yeah.
And it'll be real nice when you say director and people don't picture a man, or you say comedian,
pilot, all of it, right?
Cinematographer, all of it. Yeah.
What was the phrasing for her directing? It was exactly that. The phrasing on Wikipedia or one of these things about being the first.
The first woman to
lens a Marvel movie.
Yes,
That's
yes.
how they described you, the first female to lens a Marvel. And it's nice when you hear first female. That's nice together because you're like, oh, I've done something for the first time. But then after, I understand. I think they're two probably separate points because they can belabor that. Because I remember when I had my late night show, all the people ever asked me what's it like to be the only woman in late night, and I was like, that's not what I'm thinking about. Do you think that's what I'm thinking about?
Yeah,
being I'm not even paying attention to those guys. I'm sitting here coming every day trying to make a funny show. We're having a good time. Imagine if I got mired in all of that nonsense, I would be not productive at all. So I can completely relate.
Yeah, and I do encourage women in general, we all, it sucks, right? It is not an even playing field, but if you get mired in it, then it's hard to actually get through it and make the great work, tell the great jokes. You just almost have to just slough it off.
Yeah.
And then, hopefully people one day will stop putting us in boxes.
So how did you decide to do that? How did you decide to put the kind of crescendo of the movie in a different place?
Well, so the script is written by Barry Jenkins, incredible Barry Jenkins.
Yeah.
And it came to actually Alicia Holmes, our producer, brought the documentary T-Rex about Clarissa in that sort of 2012, 16, 17 years of age, that time frame to Barry. Barry wrote the script, and then they brought it to me. And that was part of what excited me about it, was that it didn't end where you would expect it to. I think the idea of making an inspirational sports movie, great, who doesn't love one? But you really do. They have such a format. And so I was excited. The studio obviously was scared. It is very scary to do the opposite of what everybody typically does in any
to break a format. Yeah.
To break a format. And there's certainly that feeling of after this major crescendo in the win, how do you get people to reinvest? Because I think they're it feels a little early to be over, but it's, and it's not. And then they sort of have to understand, as was her experience, what it's like to sort of have to, what do I dream about now? What do I live for now? All of these things, and kind of get back up off their feet along with Clarissa. But I really loved that about the project, and I just think her story deserves to be out in the world. Like, for me, like making a biopic about somebody who's famous already, okay, great. But like to tell a story that deserves to be known and deserves to be told, and actually people don't know, is much more, for me, a much more valuable use of my time and my skills, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of heartbreaking. Like the idea of being an athlete and having this kind of expiration date also is a different kind of it's a different kind of lifestyle than, I guess for a while, women who were actresses, didn't think they were going to get work over 40, but that's not true anymore. People are peaking in their 40s and 50s. Some people are working more than ever, but sports especially is an industry where there is a time you have to retire. There is a time where you can no longer perform your sport, and then you have to think about what else you're going to do. But to the thought of peaking and then not being able to maintain that and almost giving up and then returning to the sport is more of an original, storyline.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so like for me, it's so powerful and so relatable. Like, we can all look at these incredible athletes, but we don't necessarily relate to them, right? Like when you see a movie about somebody who's a legendary anything, right? But to actually see somebody who, like, I think there are so many different ways into this film. And one of them is like, we all know what it's like to get knocked back down and then like to have to pick yourself back up and find a purpose. I mean, in some ways, I think it becomes, I would say the message is almost like about, it being the journey, not the destination, which is such a great message for a life, right?
And also not to let the disillusionment, not to get so disillusioned with something that's not going at the pace that you expected it to go. Like when you face something and it's not happening with the speed and in the way that you imagined, not being attached to the outcome that you imagined, knowing that the outcome can change and the goalposts can change.
Exactly. And then, I mean, obviously then it really is specifically Clarissa and Jason, like what they, very specifically endured in terms of just, coming from a community that has been really overlooked and to transcend all of that, like it's such a testament to them. And, and Jason's he's still coaching, volunteer coaching kids at Burston Fieldhouse every day, Monday through Friday, like 6 p.m. And he's just such a good human. And so also to be able to, it's now there's a movie about him and like he deserves it. Right. And Clarissa, of course. And, I think it's a more relatable version of a sports movie than probably most.
Has there ever been a time within your professional career or life where you had any sort of disillusionment that could compare to that, where you thought about giving up?
I'm not giving up, but I mean, in some ways I'm in this seat because, after, I mean, if we're going to be honest, like after the Oscar nomination and Black Panther and being the first at all these things, I think I had the same idea that like the scripts were just going to come, and that I was going to have the rest of my cinematography career laid out for me. And the reality is some of it is our industry shifting. So like all the movies that I had wanted to tell, which were big, like dramatic films, the $100 million dramas, they don't really get made anymore. I got to the target too late. There's so few like directors who get to work in that space, maybe Denis Villeneuve and Nolan and like a few people get to make $100 million dramas effectively. But the rest are superhero movies, which isn't really what I set out to do. So there was a bit of a like, oh, wait, I did all the things and here I am. And it's not, my future isn't clear. And that was where, I'd been entertaining the idea of directing. It had really been the Ryan Cooglers and the Rick Famuyiwas who I did Dope with, like who have always sort of said, you should be out there directing. You have stories to tell. You have a vision for those stories, like kind of trying to push me out into the arena. And I was nervous. Like that wasn't what I came up always with the camera, like, and that was my safety net, right? I was behind the scenes, I'm like the supporting cast and I'm happy there. And so to suddenly be out like in front of all of it was really terrifying to me. But at the same time, I didn't want to, sit there waiting for something that wasn't going to come. And I was like, I'd rather start over and push myself in a new way and learn again and all of these things. So I guess, there's a lot that sort of my journey in some ways, mirrors Clarissa's a little bit.
I think everyone's does, it's just a matter of in what way. Have you had a mentor, like someone that you kind of?
I actually haven't. I think there's also this assumption with especially women that we've all been like, we came up under somebody. I see so many people who approach me and are like, giving me their cards and asking to do the thing. And I never actually I was never brave enough to do that. So because of that, and also it didn't come up as an AC. I did do some operating, such as on your show, but like the biggest sets I was ever on were my own. I had never been on a set as big as Black Panther in any capacity until I got the job.
Yeah, I mean, that would be intimidating.
It was terrifying. Exciting, but terrifying.
Yeah, I love this mentor conversation because like I never had a mentor either. I never had somebody that I could like bounce ideas off of or someone that guided my career or helped me. And I blame that person for all of my missteps because it would have been really nice. Like I have a really close girlfriend who's a CEO and she's been in this role for many years. She hops around to different companies and just like cleans them up and creates equity in all these organizations. And she's got all these mentors, wherever we go out together, she's like, oh, this is my mentor for the last 15 years. This is who I call when I'm considering whether or not to take a job. And I'm like, oh, I go, that doesn't really exist in our industry, or did it just not happen for me, because your careers can be so singular, not all of them are comparable. And the way people kind of, your hustle has to create the opportunities, this kind of inveterate hustle that we all have to adopt and be like, okay, we're ready for anything. We can do anything.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of instilling your own self-esteem and
a little bit
competence into yourself.
A little bit. It's true. And like, I think, now I have like a manager who's amazing, but I think also being a multi-hyphenate, it is, because I'm moving between these different spaces, like I have DP agents and I have directing agents and they don't even necessarily know each other, and you're just kind of making your way in the world and hoping you don't screw anything up too bad.
Right.
But I mean, also to your point, I think having a general sense of like, you kind of have to just turn in and like trust your own instinct. And when you make a mistake, try to grow from it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy. It's easier said than done sometimes, like when we fall down, it's easier. It's nice to be able to always remember that in those difficult moments that it's okay. It's not going to last forever.
Yeah.
This is just like a pitfall on your way. And that's required for any sort of trajectory is to have several pitfalls.
It's true. But I would take a mentor.
Yeah.
You offering?
I know. I'm like, no, this is an episode called We Need Mentors.
Yeah.
We need more female mentors. The movie is called A Fire Inside. It's absolutely fantastic. I loved watching it. I love the originality of the way you arranged everything. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back with Rachel Morrison. And we're back with Rachel. Okay.
We're back.
So, Catherine, what do we have today? This is the portion of the show where we give advice.
Okay, I'll take it.
Are you ready for this?
Am I getting advice or am I giving it?
You can ask your question at the end, sure.
Everything good? Don't have yeah, she'll be on shortly.
Is that the laryngitis?
Yeah, we have one caller who has laryngitis, so she may need to sort of use the chat function, but we'll do our best together in an audio medium.
I have a quick question about the movie. What because since it takes place in Flint with the water crisis and everything that happened there, you guys didn't really touch upon that.
Well, so the movie takes place before the water crisis came to light.
Okay.
So you have the underpinnings, and that's why we reference like milk tastes like water anyhow, and like all you see sort of the water plant in the background. And the idea was that you sort of feel it quite literally bubbling under the surface, but it wasn't. Nobody knew yet. So and it was we stayed in 2012 and 2014 is when it really came out.
That makes sense.
And the other thing, can we just say one more thing? I just want to shout out to Ryan Destiny, my lead actress, who's just incredible in the film and does every single one of her own stunts. And just like, I feel like I just can't wait to see, for the world to see what she becomes.
How did you come about casting her?
We were looking for athletes who could act and actors who were athletic and found that like more often than not, it's like pointing in the opposite directions, right? Like you go into theater school if you don't do sports and vice versa. So I finally had to give up the dream of finding my perfect Olympic athlete who was also a transformative actress And Ryan came into the room and just was undeniable as a dramatic performer. She really, the fight scene with Jason in the hallway was like the scene that I just saw the movie in that one performance. And so I was like, well, we're going to teach her how to box. And sure enough, like amazingly, 6 months of solid training and nutrition and all the things. But she transformed. And again, every stunt was her.
Wow.
It's amazing. Yeah, she's really powerful even when she's like not saying anything.
Yeah, just that look on her face and in her eyes. She has a very powerful presence.
Yeah, for sure. Well, our first question comes from Chris. It's a little bit of a dating and rejection question.
Perfect.
Chris says, Dear Chelsea, first things first, your podcast is amazing. I just adore you and the authenticity you bring to each episode. I make frequent drives from Portland to my hometown in New York, and your podcast has made these far more tolerable.
Hopefully not Portland, Oregon. That's a really long fucking drive.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like,
it must be Maine.
I'm writing because I'm having a hard time with being single lately. I've been single for about 5 years now, and I've been okay with that, but I do miss having a boyfriend. I found out recently from working with a therapist that I place somewhere on the autism spectrum, so naturally that's led to some insecurity when meeting guys I like. Also, the gay community is quite small where I live, so sometimes it feels like the pressure is on when you meet a good one. I did about a year ago, but he stopped seeing me right after our first argument. He clearly wasn't the guy for me, but it still crushed me into sadness, so much so that it felt like withdrawal. I guess my question is, what are your tips for handling rejection? How do you think it's best to help yourself bounce back when you're in those sad spells? I'd love to be able to be sad for less time when rejection happens. Thanks so much for reading. Have a beautiful day, Chris.
I look at rejection as a one step closer to success. Every rejection you get is one step closer to finding what you want. And I think you have to rearrange your whole attitude towards rejection. It is not the end of the world. It is not a death. It is a pointer in a different direction. It is telling you this didn't work out. Don't give up. Don't give up, but it's down the line. Like you can't take rejection that seriously. Like, somebody you broke up with after one argument, that tells you everything you need to know. That's not your person. You got that. So don't focus on the rejection part. Focus on the fact that you got through that person in a quick way, and that the next person hopefully is coming sooner now since you got this guy out of the way. What if it takes you 5 people to meet the right one? Now you're one person closer to meeting that person. That's how I look at rejection.
I like that attitude. I think the other thing is just double down on the things you love, like, and on yourself, right? So if it's going to like the ocean or boxing or whatever it is, like to get through things, for me anyway, when it's hard, it's like I have to just really invest in the things that I know make me happy. And then, you open your eyes again and you're fine.
And also a reminder of the reason why people write down gratitude lists is to remind yourself of all the things in your life that you are happy about so that you don't harp so much on the negative and that you can focus on the positive. So start doing that. Just write 10 things down every morning when you wake up. When I'm in a funk, I always do that because I'm like, get yourself out of your own ass. It's not that bad. Here are all the things that are going great.
Yeah.
And that's always a kind of a good reminder and a good wake-up call for you if you're feeling bad about yourself, and your dating life. Like, don't take that aspect of things so seriously. Like, you're going to survive until you find your person. It's not an emergency. Don't rush it and just, and focus on all the other positives.
Yeah. And in the list making category, I think it's great to write down what you want in a partner, all the positive things that you foresee in a partner for yourself is awesome. And just to touch on the autism point as well.
Yes, I want to say something about that
please.
as well. Well, just that's a great bonus too. Listen, people on the spectrum give us so much more information than we would have had without having all these people on the spectrum. It is a gift. So don't look at it as a negative. That's another positive. You're unique. You have something that most people don't have. So I was reading this thing on autism. I'm like, oh my God, it was so beautifully written about how much, the contributions that autistic people have made to our society to make us look at our ourselves and look at the things that we don't know. And your specialties and your skill sets are way superior than ours, in certain areas. All of that stuff is awesome.
Yeah.
So that's also a good thing. Start thinking about that as a good thing, not as a bad thing.
Yeah. And especially in relationships, I have a family member who is on the spectrum and, people think about it as being like, oh, maybe you wouldn't have the same kind of relationship. No, he has the most deeply felt, beautiful relationship with his partner. And like, I think it's, like you said, absolutely a boon and something that's unique and special about
And it's
you.
also when you can identify that you're on the spectrum of autism, now you know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are in relation to autism. And then that is a great way to figure out who a good partner for you is going to be. It's like getting a personality assessment. So like all of these things are good things. So start celebrating your life. Get after it.
Yeah. Well, our next caller is Amanda. Brad, we'll start with Amanda, I think, since she can talk. We'll go with her first. So, dear Chelsea, I write today feeling so defeated. I listen to your podcast every week and I'm really enjoying your couples minisodes. I would love it if my husband would join for couples counseling with Chelsea, but I'd settle for him just going to therapy locally. But he won't agree to that, and that's part of the problem. It's the second marriage for both of us. I had just come off my second train wreck long-term relationship after my divorce and was quite attracted to him as someone who had their life together and who seemed very honest and reliable, all still true. What's the issue then? Well, we seem to have a major problem with conflict resolution and conflict in general, especially when drinking is involved. The smallest issue can go from a level 2 to 3 to a 9 or 10 in minutes. For example, a few weeks ago, we had friends over and we were drinking and playing games. My daughter had just had oral surgery and he makes a joke about her appearance. Not even a funny one worth repeating. She had a really swollen face and was still in a lot of pain, so I found his comment to be super offensive and out of line. Luckily, she didn't hear it, but I glared at him and then later said something via text like, "You're really showing your true colors. I regret texting anything and will own my part in the escalation." Instead of just apologizing for the remark, which I wish he would have done in the first place and I wouldn't have texted anything, he says I'm the problem here, that I should know better than to think he would try to hurt my feelings or my daughter's. I let him know that I don't think that was his goal, but it was certainly the outcome. He upped the ante, saying I really didn't know him and I'm attacking his character. Fights always end with him saying, "We're done." Sometimes he'll send me a note from his phone with a divorce settlement. Well, his rendition of it. He does this sort of thing often. We both have hypersensitivity when it comes to our kids. And just to clarify, none of them are shared kids. They're from the previous relationships, which is understandable to a degree. Marriage is hard, but blended families and second marriages are even harder. Any insight on what I can do to help on my end is welcome. I want to know I'm putting in my full effort and dedication, as the last thing I want in life is another divorce. Amanda.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Chelsea.
Hi. This is our special guest today, director Rachel Morrison.
Hi, Amanda.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, so how long have you guys been married?
Just shy of 2 years now.
Okay, it sounds like your communication is not where it needs to be. You sending a text saying you're really showing your true colors is not how you start a conversation that's going to be a constructive one. So you have to kind of take responsibility for your behavior too. You're married, right?
I am, yeah.
Okay, I'm not married for a good reason, but I understand like communication and within relationships and how important it is to set the tone, because if you want him to act in a more responsible way and not threaten divorce in every argument or send you like texts like that, like all of that is just such immature, silly behavior, but it takes two of you to participate in that. So yeah. I would say you said he refuses to go to counseling.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't said it 100% no, but he always comes with an excuse like, we don't need to spend the money on that. You know, we don't need to take our time for that. Both of which we have. He just doesn't want to put in the time or money, to be honest.
Has he ever done any therapy, like for himself or
no?
No.
No.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it. I would really like try very hard to have a very rational, calm, loving conversation, because it sounds like you guys already are in a habit of triggering each other and kind of saying mean or nasty things, and it's very judgmental. Like that doesn't go over well if you're both dishing it back and forth. So I would try really hard to go at him in a really calm, when you're not drinking, and say, listen, I think the way we talk to each other like could really improve. Like, I think if we want to make this marriage work, I know I want to make this marriage work. If you really want to make this marriage work and we can have more cohesive, like balanced relationship where we're not sending each other nasty texts, totally take responsibility for your part. Do not make it seem like it's all about him. This is a relationship, so it's about both of you. But that you really think it would be a wise investment to go to therapy. Like, him threatening you with divorce is not a relationship. That's not fair.
Yeah.
You have to be able to argue and talk about difficult emotions without acting like it's over or childlike.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad you pointed out, though, that's probably part of why I wrote in, like, what I'm doing, because I know I'm not innocent in this, and I know that I do trigger him. And sometimes I even know, like, what I'm going to
Yes.
say that's going to set him off. And then I hate myself for doing it because I hate the whole spiral, the whole evening's ruined and et
Of
cetera.
course. Nobody wants that.
But that's
Yeah.
what's so nice. Like if you can, because sometimes I feel like people don't even know what they're saying no to with therapy. Like they don't really understand it. And especially couples
yeah.
therapy, they think of as like, oh, we're just going to be fighting, in front of somebody, as opposed to like this idea that when you're in a calm place and actually being like him hearing you say that you want to take more accountability and vice versa. Maybe there's a way to just sort of paint a picture, a clearer picture to him that like couples there, how useful it can be and why, and that it's not this contentious thing all the time.
It's not like you're going there to argue. You're going there to figure out how to resolve arguments in real life, how to not let them escalate, to not let them get to the point where he's sending you a text with a divorce decree. Like you don't want to act like that. That's not acting in a loving way. So yeah, that's a great thing to impress upon him what therapy actually is.
And the
Yeah,
idea
true.
that the time investment, like if he doesn't want to spend the time, like an hour could save you nights and it sounds like, days and nights of these like escalated moments that really it's an investment in getting your time back.
I love that. That's so true.
Like the way to have handled that situation without saying you're showing your true colors or blah, blah, especially when your daughter didn't even hear it. I understand it's out of line. He shouldn't have said anything. I get that. But the way to have handled that would have been to talk the next morning when you're both sober and calm and go, I wanted to just bring this up. Like, I heard what you said about her, and although she didn't hear that, that's hurtful to me, and it would have been really hurtful had she heard it. Like, I would have really appreciated us being like, that's what you'll learn in therapy, how to like talk about things and disagree in a calm way. Like, a disagreement can be an exploration. It doesn't have to be combative.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's worried that the therapist and I are going to like gang up on him.
Well,
and
that's
tell
what
him all-
every person who doesn't want to go to therapy is worried about. So he has to get over himself.
Yeah.
So it requires a degree of him acting like, just stepping up and meeting the moment and stepping up to the situation. But yeah, please just try and just impress that upon him and have it in a loving way. Don't be accusatory. Don't let it get escalated. If it does get escalated, put a pin in it and just like walk away from the situation and say, okay, I don't want to fight right now. We can talk about it another time.
Yeah. Another good tip, because that's something I need to work on too. I need to just let it be sometimes.
And this is like a very cliche, the old adage that everyone uses, but like if you want something to change, you need to change. And that's also why therapy is helpful. Like, your level of self-awareness increases, your level of accountability increases. Have you been to couples therapy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I did once go with a boyfriend who flipped out when we went to couples therapy. I mean, he hit the roof. He thought for sure that me and my therapist were against him. Like, I hadn't told my therapist anything about this relationship. I hadn't even seen my therapist in years. And I was like, I had hit a crossroads. And my boyfriend just lost his marbles. And I realized in that moment, we're not going to get anywhere. Like, it's not going to happen because of his resistance to actually deal with stuff. So if you're dealing with that situation, then that is going to be difficult because then you really have a decision to make. But hopefully you can get him to agree and it won't be like that.
And maybe, what if like he finds the therapist, or like if it feels like it's coming from his court, a friend of his recommends somebody so that it doesn't, it's not your therapist or I don't know if that would help at all, but
That's a really good idea. Definitely had not thought of that.
Yeah, and make him part of the decision. Do you want a female? Do you want a male? What would you prefer? Make it all about, making him comfortable. Since you're already open to going to therapy, it doesn't really matter where you go,
Yeah, good tips.
Okay, well, problem solved. Good luck with the rest of your marriage.
Yeah, half of the problem is solved.
Okay,
All right,
well,
keep us posted.
I will. Thank you guys.
We
I
like
love
progress
listening to
reports and updates.
We do.
and good luck.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Bye. All right. Well, our next question comes from Lauren. Lauren says, Dear Chelsea, I'm writing because I don't know who else to ask about my dilemma. My wife and I have been married for nearly 7 years now, together for 11. We genuinely love each other and are both extremely successful in our careers. Careers tend to take a front seat to everything else, including our non-existent sex life. We've been to therapy in the past, and while it's helped, we haven't resolved our issues. My wife despises oral sex, says it makes her gag. Unfortunately, that's the primary way I've engaged with sexual partners in the past. It's what turns me on the most. Other things we've tried have been triggering for my sexual abuse and trauma from my past. I've never had someone love me and care about me as much as she has, but I don't want a sexless marriage for the rest of my life.
Oh.
I've even thought of cheating, which I've never done to any partner, but the lack of feeling desired and the lack of sexual activity has really taken its toll on me. Hoping you have some advice. Thanks so much, Chelsea. Lauren.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi. I think we got you muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My voice is very
That's
terrible right
okay.
Oh, sorry
what?
that we're straining it by the podcast.
Brad, can we get the chat function up on the screen?
That is quite a predicament that you're in. It sounds like you need a sex therapist.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea.
Like a regular therapist isn't going to be able to kind of bridge this gap, because if she has that kind of reaction to basically the kind of sex you want to have, then that is some kind of like, it doesn't sound like it's going to be something you're going to be able to tackle without someone who has experience discussing this.
And especially if it sounds like you have some trauma in the past too. Like I do think a sex therapist will be really trained in navigating some of the intricacies.
Is she open to that?
You said she would be open to that?
yes, she
Yeah,
would be.
I think that's what you need to do, because like, also, like, I love what you said, that both of your careers are like, take the front seat. But that also is an issue. When both people work that hard, that always can become an issue, because when you are exhausting all of your efforts into one area of your life, you don't have a lot of stamina for the other areas of your life.
And especially if you're getting fulfillment from them. I mean, there's I think you start to feel like there's no void, but there obviously is.
She's saying that getting her to open up, she's very private, that getting her to open up would be very difficult. Well, I mean, it is going to be difficult. And it's also necessary if you want to salvage your marriage. Like, there's really no other option. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to get her to, like, if she wants to salvage the marriage and if she's where you are, then, that's what you got to do.
And there may be, I mean, this person, like a therapist, might have some more ideas for you in terms of like, do you explore opening things up, or do you explore like, what are some other ways to get both of your needs met, but like under the supervision of an expert, where it feels like it's safe and contained, as opposed to like,
right, yeah,
like a trauma-informed sex therapist. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And have you had individual therapy for what you've been through as well? Oh, we've got it here.
Is this her chat?
Yeah.
This is very funny, the way we're doing this. Yes, I've been in individual therapy for the past 10 years. Okay, great.
That's great.
Okay, well, that's your homework. Go find a sex therapist, a trauma-informed sex therapist.
All right. Thanks so much, Lauren.
I did want to say, Chelsea, I did bring this out of retirement.
Oh God!
Sorry for.
Oh my God!
She just says sorry about our president.
This is so nice. The podcast and me performing live are my biggest gifts, because I always forget about the fact that our reality is this when I'm recording or when I'm on stage. For those moments, I always forget. And now,
I feel like we need to update the shirt. Like, fool me once, like fool me once it's you, or
shame on me.
But
fool me once, shame
now
on
we
you.
need like sorry about my president and our entire country.
And the makeup of our country.
Yeah.
And we have to apologize for Elon. No, actually, South Africa has to apologize for Elon Musk. He started there.
That's right. Right.
Anyway, good luck with everything.
Thank you.
How do you think about that in terms of like your creative professional life and with the backdrop of what's going on now?
I mean, you mean the world? The world being on fire?
The world is on fire too.
Do
you have children?
I do. I have 2 kids. They're 6 and 9, and like they're certainly like what keeps me kind of going in the morning, and hopefully the future. But it's a really messed up time, and it's like, I mean, I feel good that the movie that I'm endorsing right now actually has some messaging that I can stand behind. Like, it's not just creative, like fodder that's like completely and hopefully can sort of move the needle in some way, shape, or form. But Yeah, it's I don't know. It's hard to like wake up every day and think that like this is our reality, and like to I mean, I'm terrified of what the like long-term damage is going to
what
be.
the potential could be,
Yeah.
what the future will look like. Because there's a part of me that's like, maybe nothing really will happen because they're all so incompetent. And then, or maybe our institutions are so strong, but like whatever he did to our institutions the last time when they took their first beating,
Yeah.
it's like, are they strong enough to withstand?
I mean, I was at the power breakfast this morning, and one of the speakers was a woman in Texas who was who basically, I guess she went into labor at 18 weeks and couldn't get anybody. She went into sepsis. She almost died. The whole fucking nine. And that's a result of one term. And I forget what the number of thousands already. Like it's just,
that's the result of one term, and here we are in term 2. Yeah. I'm always looking for anyone to inject some sort of optimism so I can focus on that. It's like the last thing I hear is what I hold on to.
Yeah. Well, Arizona and I think Florida, if I'm not mistaken, Brad will tell me, but they like actually had stuff on the ballot that was for abortion rights, and they all passed.
No,
like there were a few. There were a few
Florida
states.
did it.
Not Florida. Then.
No, Florida
Arizona
had a
for sure did.
60% majority, and that's still not enough. They needed 60%, and they were at 57%.
Okay,
but
Arizona did pass.
Arizona did, yes.
So we like that.
Yeah.
Good
what
job,
else?
Arizona.
Wait, let's come up with something else optimistic. Quick.
Well, I think okay. Okay. That's great. I think it like as a creative, like our jobs are to provide optimism, right? To provide a story that you can hold on to provide hope and some sort of kind of hopefulness in the dark. You know, like, okay. So when I think about my stand up, or when I think about my books, or even the guests that we're having on, is the idea that you have to keep chugging away. We can't give up and throw our hands up. That's not an option. You know, like that's what they want. They want us to give up. They want us to be like, you know, so browbeaten and desultory in a sense that we have to really just take our jobs more seriously than ever.
Double down.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, in the stories that you tell and the projects that you choose, and to also really double down on helping other women succeed in the business that we're in. Mm-hmm. I think that's really the most important thing to always remember, is that to be mentors, you know, when we didn't have them, to become what we didn't have. And I always try and think about that with all, like, you know, anyone who comes to me, I want to help them. And I think all women should take that on.
Yeah, agreed.
Whether you're in a position of power or not, you should be helping other women, you know, achieve their goals, achieve their dreams, make sure they're taken care of, whichever ways that you can.
Yeah, which really brings us back to the movie, because that's exactly what Clarissa did. You know, she fought for other women athletes as well.
Yeah.
That was
OG in the parody space.
Yeah, that was amazing when she demanded equal
pay for Olympic athletes. Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're taking a break and we'll be right back. And we're back.
We are back. So our last question comes from Lynn. This is a bit of a complex issue, so stick with me. But she says, "Dear Chelsea, my husband and I adopted our son internationally about 6 years ago, completing the process just before COVID. Adoption was a long and expensive journey, but I always imagined we'd adopt again within a few years. Unfortunately, the program we used slowed down for Americans, and we found ourselves waiting for it to reopen. Then earlier this year, I was diagnosed with MS, and shortly after, the program reopened, but we were declined due to my diagnosis. My MS, by the way, is currently fine and really no symptoms since a flare-up 6 months ago. With adoption from the country with ethnic ties for our current son not being feasible, we started exploring other options, including biological birth or embryo adoption. A month ago, we were weighing whether to move forward with the financial and emotional investment of an embryo transfer, and we ultimately decided to proceed. Obviously, we can always stop and not do it, but we're at the point where we will be transferred the embryos. While I've consulted my doctors, who've all assured me it's safe, I still have concerns. At 40, I wonder if it's responsible to have another baby, given my MS and the 9-year age gap my son will have with his sibling. I also worry about whether I'm taking on too much or if our family is at its capacity for tasks and challenges. I also, although both children will be ethnically different from us, they would not be sharing cultural ties like we had originally wanted. I do feel some guilt knowing there are children waiting for families, but for us, it's not been an easy path. I'm reaching out because I have so many unanswered questions and would deeply value your thoughts. If you were in my position, what factors would you focus on when making this decision, especially regarding personal health, the confusion this might inflict on our current son, and does all of this just feel kind of bonkers? Thanks for your time and guidance, Lynn. And actually, we can get rid of these because she's not going to join us.
What do you think about that, Rachel?
I mean, it hits kind of uniquely close to home for me in a lot of ways. Something very similar with my mom had a hard time getting pregnant, went through the whole adoption process. The day before they were supposed to meet the child that they were adopting, she found out she was pregnant with me. They ended up, my dad was like, it's your call. We would have been 10 months apart. And I think my mom felt like it was sort of, it was going to be too much and not fair to either of us, and thought she'd be able to adopt again. And then, had me, and a few years later was diagnosed with cancer. And very similar. Was no longer eligible to adopt. And, I had a lot of loss as a child. My mom was sick, my dad was sick, and always wanted a brother and sister. So my answer is like, have another kid because your child will now, have a sibling. But we wouldn't, 9 years is a significant difference. So for me, like I always said, I wasn't gonna have one kid without having two because I have so much trauma about being an only child. But it is so specific to my circumstances that I don't know that it's actually applicable advice to anybody else other than, in my scenario, I just always wanted a brother and sister. I never had one.
I can understand that. I come from a family of 6, so I understand what big families are like and how beneficial it is to have siblings. Again, I think all of the questions that you're posing and everything that you're saying, that there is enough, like, I feel like with parenting, if there's any doubt, don't do it. You have to be 110% ready to make this addition to your family, and all of your questions and concerns are completely valid, and you're not sure. And I feel like that's your answer. You're not sure, then, and you're happy with the dynamic that you have now, and things have changed. So I think you have to change your expectations of what you want your life to be, and focus on your health and the child that you do have and your marriage. I don't think putting any extra pressure on your situation is the answer, just based on your email.
Yeah, and I think because of her age, like, it can feel like, oh, we have to make this decision right now. But I think, like, give it 6 months. If you still feel in 6 or 8 months that, like, you really must have this child, then maybe it's a different answer. To me, 9 years is not a huge difference. I have brothers that are 14 years apart, and we're all very sort of like spread apart. So to me, that just feels like fun. And you guys are a little bit spread apart too. Yeah. So like that part doesn't feel too bad. But I do think the point about like, are we at our capacity for challenges is sort of, maybe just sit with this since it is such a recent diagnosis.
I would be curious 2 things. I would be curious what her son thinks. 9 is old enough to have opinions about things. There are kids that are dying for siblings and kids who are like, I'm good, and if it, like, because that is the person probably who's going to be most impacted is her other child. So I'd be curious if it's something that he's always wanted, or if he, is kind of indifferent or doesn't want. And then I also, I'm not in any way an expert on MS. I would say talk to somebody about what the more advanced stages look like, and maybe get some information from people who are experienced and know what is going to be asked, down the line.
Yeah, that's a good point to ask your son. He is 9, and get his input.
Yeah, that's great.
And then it really is a family decision.
Yeah. All right, we're okay to go to wrap.
Okay, well, we're wrapping up with Rachel Morrison. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It was nice to reunite with you once I found out we were reuniting. Make sure you check out her movie, The Fire Inside. It's very exciting that your directorial debut is happening in real time.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, there's billboards up. I'm like, there's no backsies. I just want to say to the studio, like,
no backsies.
Yeah. No, it's real. It's exciting. And it is. It's like, it's the one movie that the whole family can go to that isn't animated, which, I wish there were more of those, to be honest.
I do too, quite frankly. I do too. Okay, well, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Awesome, thanks.
And we'll see everyone next week.